Now, with the summary data being created here, we can use that summary data to output it here instead of this dummy text widget. Instead, here I again want to display a column widget with one row per summary data, so to say, per map in this summary list, you could say. And then in every row, I want to display the question index, some indicator that shows us whether the question was answered correctly or not. And I want to display the question, the correct answer, and the user answer. We could do this all here in this results screen widget, but this widget tree here would get rather big and complex. And for that reason, since as you learned, it is considered a good practice to break your widgets apart and split them across multiple smaller building blocks, I'll do just that. And I'll add a new file here, which I'll name questions_summary.dart. And in there, I'll add my questions summary class, which extends stateless widget. And that's one S too much. So stateless widget is extended here because I won't need to manage any state in here. And as always, we should import from the Flutter package the material Dart file to unlock stateless widget. Now inside of questions summary, we of course need that build method, as we always do. And I also need to accept some data, because of course I want to use questions summary inside of results screen in place of this placeholder text widget here. And I of course want to pass my summary data, so this list of maps to questions summary then. Therefore, in questions summary, I'll add a new property, which should be a list that contains all these maps where the keys are of type string and the values are any kind of objects. And the name of this property could be data or summary data, to be a bit more specific. Now, of course, just adding the property is not enough. Instead, we need this questions summary constructor function to accept and set this summary data. And here for that I'll accept a positional argument, though of course you could also use a named argument as we did it before for other widgets as well. And I'll add at least one named argument. I'll add this special key argument which is forwarded to the parent widget. And this can be turned into a constant constructor. With that, we get and set our summary data here, and we can now use that here to output that column, which I mentioned before, where every row should represent one piece of summary data. So one map in this list of summary data. So for that, back in questions summary.dart, we have to set the children argument of column. And before, we always set this to a list where we then manually added all the widgets that should be displayed on top of each other. Now, I will not do that here though, because I already have a list here, this summary data list. But of course, that is a list of maps, not a list of widgets, and children wants a list of widgets. So what can we do? Well, we can transform this list from a list of map objects to a list of widgets. And we do this by using summary data here and calling the map method on that list. And by the way, the fact that this method is called map has nothing to do with this map value type. Map simply means that we map a value to a new value. So here we pass our function to this map method. And this function, as before, receives an argument automatically passed in by Dart. In this case, it will be one piece of data, you could say. This name is up to you. And in this function, we then want to return the widget to which this piece of data should be mapped. And the widget to which I want to map it here should actually be a row widget. And that's now a new widget, which we haven't used before. The row widget is in the end the horizontal equivalent to the column widget. Where column is used to display multiple widgets next to each other vertically, row is used to display multiple widgets next to each other horizontally. Therefore, just like column, row takes a children argument, which we set to a list of child widgets. Now here you see that I'm currently getting an error though, and the error I do get is that my iterable thing here can't be assigned to a parameter of type list. And I get this error because map actually returns a so-called iterable object, which is almost the same as a list, but not entirely the same. And this is just some internal thing in Dart, but thankfully such an iterable object can easily be converted to a list by calling toList here at the end. So we chain the toList method after calling map. So on the result produced by map, which is this iterable object, we call toList. And now here we generate a list of rows, and in every row I then want to output various pieces of information. For example, the index of the question for which we're outputting data here. And here we can start quite simple and simply output a text widget for that. And the text that I want to display here is my question index plus 1. Because as you might recall, these indexes start at 0, list indexes start at 0, but if I want to display the number of a question to the user, it would be rather strange if I start at 0, because we humans tend to start at 1 for the first question or the first item in a list of items. That's why I want to add 1 to that index, and I can do this by accessing data and then the question index key, which is accessed like this. So you access values in your maps just as you access values in lists by using these square brackets, and then between those square brackets, the key of the value that you want to get access to. For lists, it was the index which you put between those square brackets. Here for maps, it's the key of the value instead. So between these square brackets, you then use one of the keys you defined when creating the map. So question, question index, correct answer, or user answer. And here I'm using question index. This then provides the value that's stored under that key in this map. So for question, it provides this question index, which should be a number. Here I then want to add 1 to it, and this now causes a problem here. It actually causes multiple problems, as you will see, but it causes one main problem because here Dart does not know which kind of value will be stored under that question key. Because I set this map object to be an object where the values can be of all kinds of types. So therefore Dart does not understand that here this I value is a number. I mean, it knows here that it's a number, but for the final map which it produces, it just knows that all these different keys can have all kinds of value types. It does not memorize the exact value types for the specific keys. And therefore here, this value returned by accessing the question key is also considered to be of any kind of type. Therefore here we have to do something that's called typecasting. You can use the as keyword, which is built into Dart, to tell Dart that you know more than Dart knows and you know which kind of value this will be. You don't have to use typecasting a lot, but when working with maps that store mixed kinds of values, as we're doing it here, it's quite common that you need to use typecasting. After as, you specify the type of value you know you'll get here. So in my case here, an int. Now this should be wrapped into regular parentheses, an opening parentheses before data and a closing parentheses after int here, to tell Dart that this should be evaluated as one value, so to say. With that, Dart knows that this here will be of type int, and it then adds 1 to it, but now we have a new problem. And the new problem is that we can't pass an argument of type int to the text widget, because that actually wants a value of type string. Hence, we must convert this number here to a string, and one way of doing that is to wrap this with another pair of parentheses, but now the closing parentheses is after this +1. And then on this overall value that is derived here, which is an int, you can call toString to convert this int to a string. So a bunch of parentheses, which we here also have to use because we're working with such a map, which is not very precise type-wise, but I of course also wanted to show you this map data type in this course, because you will encounter it from time to time in your Flutter apps. And this is how you can handle it, and how you also can convert an int value to a string. And with that, we should be outputting the question number here as a first item in this row of widgets here. But of course, that's not all that should be output.